Hello everyone, this is Connie doing another PMAM tutorial. Today I'll be going over some of the basic test elements that you will often find in portal maps. These are the most common and most important ones, and I would like to go over their implementation in Hammer. They're thankfully mostly simple, but there are some things I want to go over. First thing I want to go over is creating Fizzlers, or Emancipation Grills, or whatever you want to call them. Here I have the skeleton for a set of Fizzlers. So you want to have the Fizzler models, which are 128 units tall, which is one puzzle maker block. I have them set as prop dynamics, set to fizzler_dynamic.mdl. You just search Fizzler in the model browser, it'll show up. There are two Fizzler models. There's fizzler.mdl and fizzler_dynamic.mdl. I'm using Fizzler Dynamic because Fizzler Dynamic has animations that you can use if you turn on and off the Fizzler. And that's something I do want to go over. But let's just get to making the Fizzler part itself. Right now we just have a set of prop dynamics with the Fizzler model. What we can do is we can use no draw, and we can create a brush. And what we want to do is we want to make sure it fits between the, I don't know what we'd call these, the lips of the Fizzler. You want to make sure it fits between them. And you also want to make sure that it is the right size. So it's 128 units tall to match with the Fizzler model. Now, we have this no draw block. Now what we want to do is we want to cut this up into a few pieces. So we'll take the clipping tool and we'll cut this into 3 pieces where the sides are 64 units wide and the middle is just, the middle can be whatever, as long as these sides are 64 units wide. So now, let's go into the texture browser and let's find our Fizzler textures. So there are a number of them. There's Fizzler L, Fizzler R, and Fizzler Center. I'm going to use Fizzler Center on the center. I'm going to use Fizzler L on the left. And I'm going to use Fizzler R on the right. Now these textures aren't yet aligned, so if we click on them and select Fit, it will fit all the textures. And now we have a Fizzler. The reason why we split it into sections like this is because otherwise this edge effect becomes really wide and it's really obvious and looks ugly. Now to make it into an actual Fizzler, we select all the brushes and we change it into a trigger portal cleanser. And I'm going to give it a name. I'll just say Fizzler Trigger. And there are a few key values here. You can make it invisible if you want, and the scan line is just a particle effect that Fizzlers in the game use because it looks cool. Under flags, you can change what it affects. Be careful, if you select everything, it really will fizzle everything. I've seen people put Fizzlers in their exit elevators and the elevator gets fizzled. So just keep it simple. Clients and physics objects covers pretty much everything you need. Now, you'll notice that we only did one set of Fizzlers. That's because to make the second set of Fizzlers, we just want to copy this down. And the reason why we want these to be separate, instead of all being one Fizzler, is because when you shoot your gun at this Fizzler, it will light up this Fizzler, but not this one. So if you have them separate, they'll light up separately, like they do in the game. Now, that's pretty much all the setup we need. This Fizzler will now work in the game, but if we wanted to be able to turn off the Fizzler, just get a button. I'll just go over how to turn off the Fizzler. So, I'm going to name my Fizzler models. Let's call it Fizzler model. And let's say on this button, on pressed, we select the models and we set animation, no reset. And we can look here, we can see the different animations that it has. Idle, close, and open. Close idle is also a thing. You most likely won't need that. I'm just going to select all of our Fizzler models. And to make sure it works correctly, I'm going to go to the hold animation key value and turn that on, because then that way the animations will definitely not loop. They'll just hold the last frame instead of looping infinitely. So now let's go back to our button, set animation, and I'm going to say when we press this button, we want it to turn off the Fizzler, so we're going to set the animation to close. And to turn off the actual Fizzler part, we'll select our Fizzler trigger, and we'll just disable. To turn it back on, we'll say on unpressed, set animation, set the animation to open, and for Fizzler trigger, we just enable again. And that will be our Fizzler. Okay, so here we have our portal set up. I have some portals placed. We step on this button, it turns off the Fizzler, and you can see the Fizzler models are animating and closing. If I walk through this, it clears my portals. If I go and grab a cube, it deletes the cube. That's how you create a Fizzler. Now, there is something you'll notice, and it's that these walls on the inside of the Fizzler are very obvious. So there are a few ways we can combat that. So one of the ways is you can just take the edge of the Fizzler, and instead of making it one block, you can make it two thinner blocks. So that way you can actually see the internals of the Fizzler model. Now the issue with this one is that if you look from up here, the top will be exposed. So you will have to find a way to cover the top, but that's one way, and that essentially creates a hole for the Fizzler to be in so you can see on the inside. The other way, if your Fizzler is freestanding, like this pillar, you can simply texture this wall with no draw. So then it's invisible and you can just see inside. And that automatically covers the top because the top will just have a normal texture on it. This will not really work if your Fizzler is up against a wall that leads to the void, because otherwise, if you put no draw here, then it'll just show you the void. So I'd say this is better for freestanding Fizzlers, and making a hole is better for Fizzlers that are up against the wall that leads to a void. One last thing about Fizzlers is that they're actually, the way that they block portal shots is based on their bounding box. If you don't know what that is, essentially, if you rotate something in Hammer, you'll notice this box around something. That's the bounding box. It's a box that covers the whole collisions of the thing rotated at an angle, but aligned to the axes. So if you were over here and you shot a portal here, it would block your portal shot, because it's using the bounding box and not the brushes themselves to block portal shots. If you walk here, your portals won't be fizzled, and if you put a cube here, your cube won't die, but your portal shots will be blocked. So if you ever have angled Fizzlers or a map with an instance that has a Fizzler in it and it's rotated, just be wary of that, because Fizzlers that aren't aligned 90 degrees to the axes can get a little weird. Next is lasers. So to make a laser emitter, you just place an env portal laser. It creates the emitter, and then it'll automatically create a laser by default. You can turn it on and off using inputs, and there are a few key values that you can mess with, but they're all pretty self-explanatory. The one I'd say you probably don't want to touch is lethal. I can't imagine a scenario where having a laser that kills you immediately will be very helpful, but, you know, if you do need that, God help your soul, hey, it's there. It's an option. Now, of course, there are a few weird things about laser collisions. One of them is that lasers will not touch the player if they are in the air. If you're in the air or jumping or anything, lasers will not collide with you, they will not hurt you. If the laser is vertical, so going up or down, it will always hurt you, no matter what. So let's just see that here. Or if I fall through this laser, you can see it's not doing any damage to me. But if I try to launch myself through this laser, it does damage to me. Because this one's vertical, and it will always deal damage to me, no matter what. The thing about laser collisions is that they're pretty annoying. Nobody really likes them. So, there's a console command to turn them off. SV_player_collide_with_laser. You can set it to 0, and then you will no longer have laser collisions enabled. It's a server command, but, you know, in 99% of cases, this will be a net positive for your map because people don't like trying to go through portals with a laser in it, and the laser keeps bumping them out of the portal. There are some cases where you might want to do this. For example, if you're making a lead laser type puzzle where the collisions are important. Most likely you're not doing that, so I would recommend turning off laser collisions to save everyone a headache. You can do that in your map by using a server command entity. So a point server command, just place this here. I'll just name it server command. And you want to trigger this when the map starts. You can do that in a few ways. I'm going to do it with a logic auto. So I'll place my logic auto. Add an output, on map spawn, server command, command SV player collide, if I could spell, with laser 0. So this just means when the map starts, it will send that command and turn off laser collisions for the map. Which is great, because then you don't have to deal with that messing up your puzzle. As for the laser catchers, it's just prop laser catcher. Also very simple, very straightforward. You can change whether it's offset or centered or not. Same thing you can do with the laser emitter. And you just use outputs to make it output to things the same way you would any other element. If you want a relay, you can just use prop laser relay. It's the same as the laser catcher pretty much. You just use outputs to make it do stuff. Okay. Now, the thing about these laser models you want to make sure of is you want to make sure that there's a hole and that they are embedded in the wall properly. Because these models have internals and you can see inside them, and it just looks a lot better if you have a hole behind where the laser emitter is, or the laser catcher, or whatever it is, so that you can see underneath and see inside. Next, we'll talk about light bridges. Light bridges are very, very simple. Here, we have a prop wall projector. This is our light bridge emitter. There's really not much to say about it. Honestly, this is one of those things, you just put it down, and it works, pretty much. I mean, light bridges aren't very complicated, they do one thing. So, you can just put down a prop wall projector, and it does that. And you can control it through inputs and outputs. It will create an entity called projected wall entity. And this entity is very simple. It has no anything. This is essentially just the bridge without the emitter. You're likely not going to need to interface with this, but if you're doing some funny scripting stuff, you know, you might want to be able to spawn this entity directly, but that's just, you know, some fun trivia. This entity spawns another entity called projected wall entity, and that is the bridge. So that's my fun fact for the day. Next, we'll talk about funnels. So funnels, there are two different sizes of funnels. In the base game, there's 192 unit funnels, and in the Puzzle Maker, there's 128 unit funnels, because they fit within one Puzzle Maker block. I would recommend using the 192 models whenever you can, because they look better, the scale is better, the funnel itself fits within the model, whereas with the smaller model, the funnel actually is bigger than the model itself, and it looks very strange. with funnel frames, it's tough because they're circular, and making circles in Hammer is tough, and especially for this entity which is so large. But what we can do, and what I often do, is there's actually an instance of the funnel frame. So if we make a func instance, and we go into instances, into gameplay, we can see all these different tractor beam frames. We'll just say tractor beam frame, black. And there we go. Here is our funnel frame, and it's the same one as I have here. You just have to align it correctly and put it in the wall and stuff, but that is the frame that you can use that's provided with the game if you don't want to make your own. So the thing about funnels is they're slightly more complicated. The way funnels work is they have a linear force input, and that is how you determine whether it's going forwards or backwards and how fast it's going forwards or backwards. We're just going to name this funnel, and we can see here funnel direction forward or reversed, and it has a number next to it, plus 250 or minus 250, and that's related to the input that you use to change the funnel direction. So I have this button here, just to demonstrate. I'm going to say on pressed will reverse the funnel when we press this button. So to reverse the funnel, we go here and go to set linear force. And we want to set it to minus 250. Why? Because minus 250 is the default speed that funnels go when they're reversed in the campaign. The minus essentially tells the game that it's going backwards. If we set it to just 250, then it would be telling the game it's going forwards. So when we unpress the button, we want to set it back to just regular plus 250. So now that we have that set up, let's check it out. Here we have our funnel. If I step on this, it reverses the funnel. Ultimately, just understanding that that's what linear force means and how to use it is pretty much all you need for this entity. The last major element I want to touch on in this video are Faithplates. So the thing about Faithplates is there's an instance for the visual aspect of them if you don't want to set them up yourself. If you do want to set them up yourself, they're pretty simple. It's pretty much just a model, a prop dynamic, and an ambient generic to play the sound, but there's an instance for that if you just want to get started. And that instance is here. Instances, gameplay, faithplate_black.vml. This is the instance I'm using, but there's a number of other instances in this folder. Instances, gameplay. See, there's faithplate black, black imposter, which I don't know what that means, faithplate clean, dirty, whatever. But that's just to get us set up with the model and the launchpad and whatever. This doesn't have any of the stuff to make the faithplate actually work yet. So how do we make the faithplate work? First, we want to make a trigger. And the trigger is what will launch us when we step on the faithplate. So I'm just going to make a trigger on this. And I'm going to make the trigger slightly smaller than the faithplate model itself so that the player can walk around it without being launched accidentally. The way that faithplates work in the campaign is that you will often be able to step behind the catapult without being launched. So you can like aim yourself and then go forwards, and that's something I like to make sure is still a thing. So when we make our trigger, we want to turn this into a trigger catapult. This is an entity specific to Portal 2 that was made specifically for this. And what we want to do is we want to give it a target, because faithplates will always launch you to a specific target, so we want to find a target. To make a target, we create an info target. The reason we use info target is because it's a very lightweight entity that is deleted after the map is made. It just serves as a set of coordinates for us. I've just named it catapult target. So I'm going to go back to my catapult, and I'm going to set launch target to this info target. So now, when we step on this catapult, it will launch us towards this info target. So a few of the key values here. Player speed and physics object speed, I mean, pretty self-explanatory, but it should be noted that the speed also by default affects your trajectory. If you have a lower speed, the game will give you more upwards velocity to account for that and still try to make it to the target. Whereas if you have a higher speed, your trajectory will be more direct towards the target. So if you want the player to arc more, you want a lower speed. If you want them to go directly towards your target more, you want a higher speed. I'm just going to set it the default for now. And we're going to see how it works. Oh no, we're not going to see how it works yet. Because there's still something else. Now, we have this trigger catapult, but it's not hooked up to the faithplate itself yet, so the faithplate won't animate. So what we can do, I've named my catapult instance. I've named it catapult. We want to select our trigger, and we want to make an output on catapulted. Select your catapult instance, and you want to choose one of these outputs, or one of these inputs. These essentially just tell you what animation that it'll use. Fast means the animation where it launches and goes back down fast. Normal is the normal animation, and up is when it launches straight up, like in the intro to Faithplates in the game. We're just going to use normal. So this will now trigger the normal catapult animation and the sound when we get catapulted by this trigger. Let's try that. So here, we have our catapult. Our target's about there. And it launches us. And we can see, when we step on it, it animates. Now you'll notice, I'm gaining a lot of upward velocity, and I'm actually hitting the ceiling, which is resulting in me not actually hitting the target. So, if we turn up the speed, I'll say 525, our trajectory is now more direct, and we can actually hit the target. One thing you also want to be careful of when making your catapult trigger is that under flags, that you have v-physics objects set. This essentially means that physics objects like cubes or gel bombs, if you want to use gel bombs on Faithplates as a puzzle element, that just means that those things can be launched by the catapult. Otherwise, it only defaults to players. But catapults can launch everything, so just make sure that you have that set. Now, of course, the thing about Trigger Catapult is it has a bit more functionality that isn't often explained, so I just want to go over that a little bit, in just a little bit of detail. So here, I'm making a new Trigger Catapult, just to demonstrate. But you can use these entities for something that is called scripted momentum, or scripted flings. There are multiple parts in Portal 2 where the game will use these entities to push the player a little further so that they reach a particular area when they're flinging. Otherwise, they might overshoot it, they might undershoot it. This is a way of scripting those interactions so that they happen more consistently. So I'm just going to make another target, just to demonstrate. And I'm going to name this fling target. And I'll set the launch target to fling target. But there are a few key values here that are key for this. Namely, use threshold check. So use threshold check makes it so that the trigger will only trigger if whatever is entering is already moving at a certain speed. And this speed is relative to the speed that the catapult is launching you at. So, let's say I'll say 550. So, we can actually see how fast the player moves in-game with CL_show_pause2, which at the top left, hold on, let me turn off developer. At the top left, you'll be able to see your velocity after inputting CL_show_pause2 into the console. And so, what you can do is you can test your fling. I'm going to have my trigger right here. And if I fall from here, you can see that my velocity reaches about 640 before I hit the ground. So, what we can do is, because our speed of our catapult is 550, we can assume that the player is going to be going higher than that. So I'm going to set the lower threshold to 0.85, so 85% of our speed. And I'm going to set the upper threshold to 1. And we're going to test this. What this means is that this trigger will not activate if we walk into it, but it will activate if we're going the right speed. So it can push us further when we're flinging, but not launch us there if we're not. Also, remember to turn on the threshold check key value, because otherwise it won't work. Anyway, those are all the major puzzle elements from Portal 2 I wanted to go over in this video. I hope that has helped you get a grasp of the basics when it comes to these entities. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out the other tutorials on this channel if you ever find yourself in need of hammer help for Portal 2. Thank you. Goodbye.